In June of 1993, the world was blessed with something truly wondrous and beautiful. Me. Also, there was a Zelda game released that month, an absolutely wonderful little Zelda game that to this day continues to charm and delight every person who plays it. Link's Awakening. It's one of the most widely loved games in history, and for me personally, one that I hold very near and dear. And this is all despite the fact that it is a blocky, colorless game that may as well be from the Stone Age at this point. But the island of Koholint and the people that live there are so uniquely memorable that it becomes real easy for your mind to look right past all this and form its own unique vision for this world. Koholint exists to us as it does in its own game, only in the imagination. So this creates a challenge for someone looking to remake Link's Awakening, as no matter how they go about designing it, it's not going to match how it looks in everyone's own heads. It is for this reason that when the remake was first announced, my initial reaction was pretty negative. It did not match even slightly how Koholint looked in my mind. I called it essentially someone else's interpretation of it. But after playing this remake, I came to realize something very important. Someone else's interpretation of Koholint was far and away better than mine ever was. Link's Awakening for the Switch is, without a doubt, the best remake I've ever played besides Metroid Zero Mission. I mean, going from 8-bit to fully redesigned HD has got to be like the single biggest jump in remake history, right? At least that I can think of. It's pretty strange to see a remake of this quality come from the Zelda series, which generally sees remakes ranging from passable to atrocious, with a sprinkle of utterly inconsequential. But every single frame of this world has been completely reimagined, with a level of care and love that I couldn't help but marvel at over and over and over, constantly at every location and every set piece. This development team fully realized the world of Koholint in extraordinary ways that I would never have even dreamed possible. I was always looking forward to the next area, the next moment, the next dungeon, to see how these guys would go about refreshing all these elements and give them new life. It's practically as perfect a remake of Link's Awakening as could possibly exist, elevating all the great elements of the original and ironing out all of the flaws and outdated mechanics. I really came around on this art style, and now I think it's just gorgeous with vibrant colors and terrific lighting. I'm ecstatic to say that my initial concern over how well the original's whimsical tone would translate wound up utterly crushed. Link's Awakening was always a game that took itself seriously, but also poked fun at itself and was very lighthearted overall, yet with overtones of mystery and unease. The new version captures all this perfectly in nearly every sense, improving the atmosphere in dungeons and forests, re-recording all the music tracks to better fit the themes, and expressive new character models to lend emotion to scenes. Even something as simple as a slight pause in dialogue can change the complexion of a scene by letting it breathe a bit. And it's little touches like this that are prevalent in every aspect of this new game. The sound quality might be the single biggest improvement made by this version. The music of Link's Awakening was always a highlight due to the catchiness of the tunes, so to hear these tracks not sound like garbage is something of a dream come true. The highlights of the soundtrack include the new Angler's Tunnel theme, which turned one of the weakest songs in the original completely on its head and added a lot of haunting ambience. Other musical highlights include the Face Shrine, the Ballad of the Windfish, and I'm so happy to say that they did a terrific job with the game's all-time best jam at Tall Tall Heights. The sound quality was one of the major things holding Link's Awakening back in terms of its timelessness, so with this checked off the list, let's look at the other major flaws and gripes from the original and see if we can check those off as well. The single most egregious problem in Link's Awakening, in my opinion, was having only 2 slots for items, resulting in non-stop menu swapping, tedious navigation around rocks and other obstacles, and overall clunky inventory management. The remake sails well past satisfactory in remedying these problems with context-sensitive power bracelet, dedicated buttons for sword, shield, and Pegasus boots, and 2 remaining buttons for items. Personally, I would have had dedicated Rock's Feather over Pegasus boots, but that's just me, and I am in no way complaining. The entire experience is 10 times more enjoyable as a result. Getting around Koholint is no longer a chore, but an enjoyable experience, turning a significant flaw into a resounding positive. Even the awful warping system was revamped, with more warp points and the abilities to choose your destination and warp at will with the ocarina. Combat was also a relative weak point in the original, but again here we see huge levels of improvement. With a dedicated shield button, enemies are now more aggressive and require a bit more thought to take down. Couple this with more readily available rupees making for a slightly earlier bow, which comes with a larger quiver, and we have yet another huge win for the remake. Another flaw to check in on are the bosses, which in the original were all pitifully easy. It started off concerning with the Moldorm fight being much easier, but from there we do start to see noticeable improvements to bosses, notably the anglerfish, which before was just spam B in his face, but now actually lasts longer than 2 seconds. And I'm sure this will surprise no one at this point, but the last major problem that I had with Link's Awakening, the obnoxious interruptive text, is of course fixed. They literally hit every single note for improvements, and improve still in other areas I never even considered. For instance, after opening the doors in a dungeon room, they stay open. No more re-fighting all the enemies every time you return to the room, which did get pretty tedious sometimes, like in the Eagle's Tower with the floor tiles. You no longer have to hit a tree from a certain angle to get a seashell to pop out. And speaking of seashells, there's twice as many as before, and twice as many heart pieces too. To offset this, you need twice as many shells to get the sword. The Seashell Mansion offers tiered rewards based on how many shells you've collected, such as an item that will ding when one is nearby. Koholint is no longer broken up into squares, which is a major blessing for a multitude of reasons. First off, it helps contextualize the architecture of the island. Being able to see in a wider field of view, you'll notice places in relation to each other that you'd never considered before. Enemies no longer exist solely on the screen you're on and will chase you from farther off. Items benefit from this greatly too, as you can now shoot from a longer distance, which tremendously improves the hookshot, making it easily the finest iteration of the hookshot in 2D Zelda to date. This great unification of the overworld does have one potential downside, in that it brings to the forefront just how small Koholint is. It's especially noticeable, I bet, to people who came straight from the previous Zelda game on Switch. This is definitely why they made Link walk so slow. But this is not a problem in my eyes. Koholint is small, yes, but it's extremely dense, and a joy to explore every nook and cranny at this leisurely walking speed. And it is an island after all, a more intimate place, not at all like the sprawling kingdom of Hyrule, so there's nothing about it that feels jarring or unnatural. It's the perfect size for this world, and the perfect world for this story. Dungeons in the original were pretty well designed for their time, and with no visual disparity, they had to rely on smart and creative design to distinguish themselves. Now, each dungeon gets a unique visual theme, and all of these are spot on and complement the design of each dungeon beautifully. The most improved dungeon all around is Angler's Tunnel, I would say, in terms of atmosphere, music, and boss, and they even fixed the original oversights that allowed you to effortlessly skip over half the dungeon. I also enjoyed relearning some redesigned puzzles, such as these chest knights that in the original I just tossed around like an idiot until the doors opened. But now there's a new way to solve this puzzle, which I won't give away, but after the fact I did notice a lot of people online were still just trying to throw them around for an hour, calling the game broken and clamoring for a patch like stupid idiots. It reminds me of the people who thought Twilight Princess was broken when it came out because of the invisible rats that slowed you down. People can be really dumb sometimes. I have a handful of small gripes about the remake that I will rattle off now. When I first started the game, my initial thought was, is there seriously no D-pad control? Why would you not have this option? Nintendo and options is like oil and water. My next impression was, holy frame rate. I couldn't believe that a second consecutive Zelda game would ship with frame rate issues, but at least it was a little more understandable for the last game. This is just super jarring for this world. The final boss Deathel is not improved at all. I've always found this boss to be very anticlimactic, but this version is somehow even easier. He just sat in one spot and was over in like a second. I was low-key hoping for the game to blow my mind with the surprise 7th phase of the nightmare battle, but no, it just fizzles into the ending. Not all of the items were improved either, and some actually feel worse than before. It is with a very sad heart that I must say they did my boy the boomerang dirty. It no longer demolishes everything on sight, and to my dismay, they removed that awesome deadly rooster combo. The Rock's Feather now has a little bit of landing lag, which might not sound like a big deal, but I'm someone who was constantly flipping all over the place like a maniac, so a little part of me died when I first saw that. The magic rod was gutted too. You can only fire 3 shots at once, and they no longer incinerate enemies on contact, instead taking 2 or more hits to kill things, rendering it borderline useless. Bombs now damage Link, which is of course consistent with the rest of the series, but it's one of those quirks about Link's Awakening that I always enjoyed. It nerfs bomb arrows too, as they will now explode in your face if an enemy is too close. The new Chamber Dungeon mode is something that piqued my interest, as I've been clamoring for a Zelda Dungeon Maker since Super Mario Maker first came out, but it turns out to be a bit of a joke. It's basically a dungeon rearranger, and the options are so limited that it's actually laughable. You can only rearrange existing rooms, you can't choose what goes in chests, so you have to open every single one, and I was in denial of this for hours before finally resigning to the asinine truth that you can't even choose which passageways you want to connect. I still can't get over that. I can only hope this is a premise for a future Zelda Maker game, because as it stands, this mode is not worth a bit of your time. But these are all just nitpicks, and they barely detract from the overall joyous experience at all. Link's Awakening for the Switch was everything I didn't even know I needed. It elevates an already great game into borderline legendary status. If this is a game that you've never played before, you are in for a treat, and for returning Link's Awakening fans, buy it, tell all your friends to buy it, speak with your wallet that this level of love and effort in a remake is far more appreciated by the Zelda fanbase than something like this zero-effort garbage. I hope this game does well, and I hope it encourages Nintendo to continue this style of remake into the underappreciated Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons, as well as a proper Zelda Dungeon Maker. But for now, I'm happy enough with this wonderfully actualized and definitive version of one of the best Legend of Zelda games.